Welcome to Vitality Made Simple, the podcast that empowers you to live better, look better, and more fully enjoy the relationships in your life. It's all about relationships, and that just leads me perfectly into our episode today with Mr. Joe Tippens. He is excellent at relationships. You've probably heard about Joe. He had a miraculous rebound from Cáncer. He had insurmountable odds, but he's curious. And I'm dedicated to talking to curious people who are curious and brave and unafraid to take control of their health span. So, and it's so interesting, Joe, when I heard about your story, I was excited for two major reasons. Of course, to hear that somebody recovered from incurable cancer or had more and more life. But number two, that your last name was Tippens, because in my patient family, one of my most beloved families that I respect and know are straight shooters were Terry and Donna Tippens. And in fact, your nephew Sam built our home in 1998. We were his first custom home when he got out of college at Oklahoma State. But I knew that I could ask Terry to verify this. And of course, when I said, Terry, is there any chance you're related to Joe Tippens? And he said, oh, Debbie, I know you've been hearing about Fenbendazol. Joe is the real deal. We thought we were going to lose him, and it's the real deal. So that was probably, and I'm guessing maybe 2018, Joe.
Well, actually, fall of 2016.
yeah. Fall of 2016 was your big diagnosis, but I think I probably started hearing about it maybe late 2017. So Joe, tell us, start wherever you want to start. Listeners, everybody knows somebody who's had cancer. So you're going to want to share this podcast. It can help so many people. Thanks, Joe. Welcome.
All right, thank you very much. I'll try to do the Reader's Digest version because the long version is a little bit too long to tell. But in the fall of 2016, I had accepted a partnership position with a firm in Zurich, Switzerland, and I got my Swiss green card. I had an apartment over there. I'd shipped all my clothes over there, and the Saturday before my Tuesday flight to literally move to Switzerland, I was feeling some congestion and head congestion, and I thought I'd just go into a weekend Doc in a Box and get some pills or something to help me on the flight the following Tuesday. The doctor in there was all by himself, and all the other people had gone home. It was closing time on a Saturday night, and he did an X-ray, and then came back and asked me to come and look at the X-ray. And on the bottom left lung, there was a kind of a swirl, a little light swirl. And he said, I need you to go do a CT scan and check this out. It looks bothersome to me, but I'm not. He said he wasn't an expert. And I said, I'll just wait till I get to Switzerland. That doesn't look too bad. And this guy probably saved my life. He hounded me all day Sunday and all day Monday to go do a CT scan. And late Monday afternoon, my flight was early Tuesday morning. I did a CT scan, and sure enough, there was a tumor the size of my fist in my lower left lobe. And I did decide to postpone my trip to Switzerland, went and had a biopsy, and it was small cell lung cancer, which is very deadly. Mm-hmm. So I permanently canceled my move to Switzerland and moved to Houston to MD Anderson and started a journey there. And it was there's two kinds of small cell lung cancer. It can be either localized in the lung or already metastasized. And mine was localized, so that was good news. Well, they started the whole regimen of chemo and radiation in the fall of 2016 at MD Anderson. And a lot of trials and tribulations along the way. They fried my esophagus into hard bacon. Nothing would go down or up. And so I made the crazy decision to live off of my fat stores and my muscle stores instead of getting a feeding tube. And I went 8 weeks with no nutrients, zero nutrients or water. And so I did IV injections twice a week to hydrate my body. And I went from 220 pounds down to about 108 pounds.
So you were a skeleton, basically.
was a skeleton with skin hanging off of it.
Mm-hmm.
And my esophagus finally healed, and I started eating oysters. I eat oysters 3 times a day because it was the only thing that would go down. And all was good. They restarted all the other radiation and chemo. And in December of 2016, late December, right before Christmas, they told me the good news was is that the big monster in my lower left lung was completely gone. But the bad news is that it had metastasized from head to toe. I had my PET scan looked like a Christmas tree. And I don't know how many people know about there, but only second to 4th stage pancreatic. But once you have small cell widely metastasized, you're a goner. 0% chance of survival and a median life expectancy of 3 to 6 months. Wow. And so that's what the guy told me. 3 to 6 months, and there's really nothing we can do. The next day, and they basically told me to get my affairs in order, plan hospice and all of that, those ugly things. And the next day, I got the wildest phone call from a large animal veterinarian in Western Oklahoma. He's now passed away from congenital heart failure. And he told me this story about a lady scientist at Merck, on the veterinary side of Merck, who had implanted cancer in stomachs, brains, liver, pancreas, all different body parts in hundreds of mice. And she was doing cancer research on the veterinary side. And her entire mouse population came down with intestinal parasites. And if you went out to any zoo in the world, there would be a pile of Fenbendazol head high they'd bring in by the front end loader side, the whole truckload size, because every zoo gives this drug to every animal in the animal kingdom, from a tiny little bird all the way up to the elephant.
Whoa. Oh.
And so she gave her entire mouse population. She was trying to save all of her research. So she gave her entire mouse population Fenbendazol. And, a few weeks later, she came back and accidentally found out that she'd also cured the cancer that she'd implanted. Well, as unluck would have it, or luck for me anyway, she then came down with 4-stage glioblastoma wrapped around her brainstem and was told there was nothing they could do. Same message, go home and get your affairs in order, think about hospice. And she cured herself of 4-stage glioblastoma with Fenbendazole.
Oh my goodness.
And so I was told that story literally 24 hours after I was told to go home and die. And I decided, what the heck, I got nothing to lose. So I started taking it along with a few other things. I'm a voracious researcher, and I was constantly researching. And I have to maybe stop here and interject that I can't explain why, but when I was told to go home and die, it didn't faze me. I was 100% positive that I would figure out a way to lick it. And I learned after the journey that there's a scientist at Stanford named Bruce Lipton who has actually connected the dots scientifically between positive thinking and what happens literally at the cellular level.
Absolutely.
Well, I don't. I can't tell you how much. I believe some percentage of my success was the fact that I was just absolutely positive I would figure out a bit. Who knows?
No, I think so, Joe. There are so many good studies now, even more and more coming out, that just that positive attitude and getting your brain into that highway, that your immune cells actually react. They can look at brain scans and functional MRIs to verify that. And so I think it's really great that you brought that out.
Well, I would recommend everybody. He has many lectures out on YouTube, and all different links, but there's a 2.5-hour one that if anybody can take 2.5 hours out of their time, even if you split it up in 2 or 3 spots, and it's called The Biology of Belief by Bruce Lipton. And I highly recommend people go watch that video, because I didn't know about it and see it until after I was in remission. But then I had to look back and go, holy cow, how much of my success was actually because I was always positive. I don't know.
Well, it's never one thing. And we'll put the link to Dr. Lipton's book in our show notes for everybody, as well as that YouTube.
I've never even read the book. I just watch his lectures.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started taking it. I didn't tell anybody at MD Anderson why and what. And, along the way, they put me on an immunotherapy clinical trial, and I really didn't want to get kicked off of the trial. I was being selfish. And so I didn't tell anybody what I was taking. And then in first week of May of 2017, I miraculously turned up NED, no evidence of disease. And in the 45-year history of MD Anderson, I'm pretty much the sole data outlier with widely metastasized small cell lung cancer actually living.
Well, I would want the listeners to know there's nothing selfish about you. This has radically changed your life, taken over your life. You've invested your own money in auditing these cases. So you're going to tell us more about that.
So
but
there's two questions people might ask. When I went from 220 pounds down to 108 pounds in an intentional fast, but kind of unintentional why. And so people say, well, fasting helps cancer. Is it possible that your fasting is what saved you? And the answer is absolutely not, because my wide metastasis happened after the fasting.
Right.
And then the second thing people say is, well, how do you know it wasn't the immunotherapy clinical trial drug that you were on? And I say, well, I've got pretty good evidence that's not the case, because this immuno drug is pretty successful for other types of cancer, but it has never been successful for widely metastasized small cell lung cancer. And the trial I was on was specifically widely metastasized small cell lung cancer, and I'm the only survivor of the trial. Right. So I don't think it was the immunotherapy, or it would have saved other people in the trial other than me. So I can kind of lay to rest that it wasn't the Fenbendazol. It truly was. And the long journey I've taken with scientists and oncologists all over the globe it started in 2017 of, that guy's batshit crazy and he's a wacko, don't listen to him, to here 6 years later, most people, and they can't prescribe it because it's not human approved. So it's illegal for them to say, do it. But now most oncologists, a majority of oncologists I've educated. Yes. And they say, well, I can't tell you to do that, winky, winky, but it won't hurt you, right? And so rule number one of medicine is don't make something worse, and I can assure people out there that this protocol I've developed over a 6-year period, it's not going to make it worse. The downside risk is virtually zero. And there is now thousands of success stories other than me, as evidence that there is upside here. So I went from NED in May of 17, again I did 2 PET scans in month to month, back to back, because one was my regular scheduled PET scan, and then another one was to end the clinical trial. And I remained NED. I was doing PET scans every 3 months.
Well, and Joe, excuse me. But a rule of medicine is not to make anything worse, but another rule of medicine is patient autonomy, and which just means you're the boss of you. And I think that's so good for people to remember. You epitomize this. I mean, you still listened to your doctors and had a relationship there, but you took control.
Because of that, I caused some problems along the way. So when they ended the clinical trial, and I knew I couldn't get kicked off of the clinical trial, I then fessed up to what I had been taking. And that set off a whole domino effect of other downstream problems, because at the end of the day, I was the only survivor of the trial. And because I admitted I was taking something else along the way, they had to throw the entire trial out.
Oh my, oh, I never
They
thought
couldn't,
about that.
they couldn't use me as a success in the trial because I was taking something else that now likely was the real reason I was saved.
Uh-huh.
And that they weren't happy with me. And I had a meeting with the Merck exec that was doing the trial, and I said, you guys are in the vet med business and in your human business. I recommend you get your animal people with your human people.
Exactly, exactly. Well, and these people make fun of these mouse studies and rat studies, but they can lead to great things. It's incredible.
So anyway, because I do business in Asia and Europe and North America, without anything, just talking to friends and family and business associates around the world, my story went viral without any marketing or digitization. And I started receiving hundreds of phone calls a week in early 2018. And I honestly didn't start this journey for anything other reason about, again, selfishness. I was naive about social media and the power of social media and the digital world. Even though I'm in the VC business and I've invested in that stuff, I really have never done a deep dive. And I naively thought if I wrote a blog, people would leave me alone.
You can go about your life.
Yeah. So I wrote the blog hoping people would read it instead of call me. And that just made it worse. The blog almost immediately went viral all over the world. I mean, literally within 60 days of writing the blog and posting it, I was in 96 countries.
Oh my goodness.
And
Hope and inspiration are,
pretty good marketers,
viral.
right?
Yes.
Right. And it went crazy. I mean, I literally was seeing traffic on the blog of 50,000 a month, 100,000 a month,
Wow.
300,000 a month, 500,000 a month. And seeing the traffic all over by country, all over the world was, I really joked about this. I had 150 hits inside of Vatican City.
Oh my goodness.
And so I'm
That's
thinking,
fantastic.
yeah, that's too
Oh,
bad. Too bad St. Joe's already been taken.
oh my goodness. That is hilarious because you can tell exactly where they're coming from.
All right, where they're coming
Yes.
from. So yeah, it went crazy. And I got up to I think over 1 million hits. And then I started because people were still calling me and still bugging me. And I've got a real job. I thought, well, if I start a Facebook group and get some volunteers to moderate it, then that'll be the forum where everybody will discuss this and leave me alone. And we did, and I made it very clear. This is crazy. I asked for global volunteers to cover every time zone in the world, and immediately had dozens and dozens of people volunteering to be moderators.
Wow.
And I'm so thankful for those people because they spend a lot of time. Anytime you do something on something like Facebook, you're going to have thousands of charlatans and multi-level marketers and bullshitters and crazy people try to join the discussion, and you got to try your best to keep that out. Mm-hmm. So I instigated a control where I embed passwords in the blog, and if you haven't read the blog, you won't know the password. And so the rule to join our Facebook group was you have to be a direct cancer patient or a direct caregiver. You have to prove that you've read the blog in its entirety, and then you have to answer a few other questions. And if you don't do all of that, you're not admitted to the group. And so we're up to, I think, 40,000 in the group today. And I think over 150,000 have attempted to join. So we keep it very tight, and the discussion is kept tight around my protocol only. So along the way, I started getting success cases in, other than me, and they're all anecdotal. They were he said, she said. You have to believe these people are telling the truth. How do we know that they are actually success cases with my protocol? And so I got the bright idea of uh, getting Oklahoma Medical Research Foundation, which is unknown to most people outside of Oklahoma, but it's very large. They have 400 PhDs. And I've got a local oil and gas billionaire to fund OMRF and starting to audit our success cases. Well, along the way, a lady scientist, she's a clinician, PhD and MD in cervical and ovarian cancer. And she had 3 miraculous recoveries in 1 month period that were unexplainable. She brought everybody in to interview them and find out what's going on. And all 3 of them said, well, I'm on the Joe Tippens protocol.
Oh my goodness. Oh,
so
that's fantastic.
she called OMRF and joined the effort. And then something very similar happened at the University of Washington in Seattle. And they called OMRF and joined the effort. And then along the way, I got to know the president and chief medical officer of Emory University Medical School, and he joined the effort. And so all went from, a bunch of anecdotal he said, she said to, holy crap, these people they got dug into their medical files, talked to the doctors and did everything, and they come out and for the first time ever in early 2022, March-ish, Stanford and Washington actually published a research paper auditing success cases. And so it's no longer anecdotal, it's real, right?
Right. Well, and as a venture capitalist, you've embarked on the most incredible adventure that you could never imagine. It's just wonderful. You were generous enough to come to our study club, and you talked about 3 succinct pathways by which fenbendazole actually works. Could you tell our listeners about those?
Sure. Well, there has to be some way that it's working, and it has to be some way that it seems to be cancer agnostic or cancer subtype agnostic. And so, thankfully, there were 3 PhD scientists, 2 of them which have now retired, unfortunately. 3 PhD scientists in India whose life work, believe it or not, was on fenbendazole on cancer. And they had proven scientifically the 3 pathways by which fenben is actually working. And first is inside a cancer cell wall, there is microtubules. If you think of a pillar holding a wall up, you think of a microtubule holding the cancer cell wall up. And this is a really layman's description. It's not quite this
Love
simple.
it. This is vitality made simple, Joe. Thank you.
Yeah. And they proved that, and by the way, those microtubules are not only necessary for the cell wall structure of a cancer cell, but they are also absolutely the key to the cell being able to divide and multiply. And 2 becomes 4, becomes 8, becomes 16, etc. And they have proven scientifically that fenbendazole is knocking out those microtubules, destroying the cancer cell's ability to replicate. And why is that? And it's just one of these lucky serendipitous things that have happened in nature. This drug was invented to kill intestinal parasites, and it just so happens that intestinal parasites have a similar cell structure to a cancer cell in terms of the microtubule. And so it was really just quite luck. And the second pathway that it works with is, I think everybody knows that cancer can't survive without sugar. It has a voracious appetite for sucrose. And they've proven that this fenbendazole is interrupting the cancer cell's ability to metabolize sucrose. And the third one, which I really think is the most fascinating, is everybody out there listening or watching that is cancer-free is for a reason. You have a very healthy level of P53, which is the cancer killing gene. And P53 is floating through your body 24/7, and you have cancer cells being generated in your body 24/7, 365. And you just happen to have the right level of P53 that's going in and killing that, and so that it can never metastasize. And those of us that get cancer, and this again is very layman's way of describing it, one of two things is really happening. Either your P53 is mutated to the point where it cannot kill cancer anymore, or for some ungodly reason, your titer level or your level of P53 is just reduced to a level that it can't kill cancer anymore. And the PhD scientists in India have proven that for whatever reason, they didn't get to continue the research to find out why, but they have proven that it's true that Fenbendazol is producing new healthy P53 in your body, which is one of the reasons I actually recommend this as a preventative measure for people. Because if you're stimulating P53 constantly, you're never going to get metastasis, right?
Right. So, well, and thanks to you, I'm now doing it 3 times a week after meeting you at the Functional Medicine Study Club. I have that crazy diagnosis of CLL subclinically. I feel fine, but I just, every time I put it in my yogurt 3 days a week and just and think positively, like you said, and just know I'm going to be fine. So thank you for that. Now tell us about the wild experience that happened with your blog getting translated into Chinese.
Well, I've got 2 Asian stories, one very good and one very bad. The very bad one is, and I cannot explain even how, when, why, but my story went viral in Korea, and the Korean government was not happy. They wanted to stop it. And there were literally tens of thousands of people in Korea taking it. And on the auspices of positively telling my story to the Korean public, they sent a marketing videographer guy from Seoul, Korea to Oklahoma City to my house. And they billed it as they were going to, really talk the story positively. But they had bad intentions from the start. They just basically did a complete hit piece on me and told the entire country of Korea that don't take this stuff, blah, blah, blah. It was really crazy. And then on the positive side, this one's really funny because I didn't even know that this was already globally called the Joe Tippens Protocol. I had no idea. I've heard some people in the Facebook group refer to it as that, but it was not. I didn't think it was widespread. So I got a call. It was only 4 months ago, and I don't answer unknown calls because I get so many. I just can't. I tell people, if you're a family friend or there's a connection, text me first, tell me the connection, and I'll call you back. But I still get hundreds and hundreds of phone calls, and I don't have time to answer all of them. But this call came in with a China country code, and I was curious about a China country.
We love your curiosity, Joe. Thank you.
So I answered the phone, and the guy with a perfect Queen's British accent, evidently he was educated in Hong Kong. He called and said, my bosses wanted me to call you. And I said, well, who are you and who are your bosses? And he goes, well, I'm the editor-in-chief of the Beijing News. My jaw dropped. And I said, well, then your bosses are the Chinese government. And he goes, yes, sir. I said, well, why are you calling me? And he said, well, do you realize that you are a rock star in China? And I said, what? What are you talking about? I had no idea any of this was going on. And he said, well, a PhD medical student in Arizona State University from China translated your blog into 2 different Chinese dialects and posted 2 different websites on China. And there's over 10 million views in those 2 websites in China alone. And we happen to believe that there's over 50,000 people on the Joe Tippens. No, it even gets better. No, it wasn't the Joe Tippens protocol. On the Uncle Joey protocol. And I said, what in the hell?
That's so rich.
Uncle Joey protocol, and 100,000 people are taking it in China. What the hell are you talking about? He said, well, we were curious about that as too, Joe, and it's quite funny. But we've located where the Uncle Joey comes from. And your niece, Casey, which is my brother Doug's daughter, had posted to something on Facebook that referring to me as Uncle Joey.
Oh, that's so great.
And the Chinese people thought that Uncle was a term of endearment, right?
And so, it is, yeah.
Yes. So I'm now Uncle Joey all over China.
I love that.
And the protocol is called the Uncle Joey protocol.
Oh, that you can't make this kind of stuff up. This is so fantastic. So
I then asked the guy a question, and I just did a follow-up ping to him last week. So I said, let me ask a crazy question. And he said, what's that? And I said, China doesn't have HIPAA laws like we have here in terms of medical secrecy of your own medical account. I don't think the Chinese government really gives a crap about people's personal medical history. Would it be possible for the Chinese government to go in and audit those 50,000 cases? It could be the largest clinical trial in the history of the world. He said, that blows my mind. He said, that's actually a really good idea, because we can't fund a clinical trial here in the United States, and here's why. It's a 20-year off-patent drug that even if FDA approved, would have generic competition the next day. Nobody's going to spend $300 million to do a new clinical trial only to have generic competition the next day. It's just the economics aren't there, and it'll never happen. Although I believe the one benefactor that should do it is the United States government, because our cancer expenditure for Medicare alone is enormous. And there would be a payback for the United States government to actually do the clinical trial, not for profit, right? But I don't think we'll convince anybody to do that. So he said that was a good idea, and he was going to check with his bosses and see if they could do something about that. So we'll see.
So that's still in the we'll see phase. Yeah, oh my goodness. Yeah, I bet it's going to happen.
They're not doing anything yet, but they're contemplating it.
Yeah. Well, it takes so long to set up, and it reminds me, the story reminds me of you had quoted a Goldman Sachs article when I heard you speak about the it's kind of like it's not a sustainable model to
curing cancer. Curing cancer is not a sustainable business model.
Yeah. Crazy. Well, and after hearing you, I went and looked up that article, and it was just, it's sort of chilling, because it also talked about how they didn't want to cure like hepatitis C, because not only would they lose the revenue, but they would also, there wouldn't be as many people transmitting Hep C. I mean, it was just unbelievable as a, healthcare practitioner trying to help people get well, to think that other people even have that attitude. And I'm sure you've been shocked many times in your journey.
Well, I'm shocked mostly by the new success cases that come in almost every week. And I spend 30 to 40 hours a week on this, and it's pro bono. I don't make any money off of this.
Right.
But almost every week, somebody reaches out to me and quote unquote says, you saved my life. And so you don't need a lot of compensation financially, because that's pretty healthy compensation. Just the feeling you get when somebody says that. And some really couple funny stories. I was in fact, these two happened back to back in successive weeks. I was in an Irish pub in Zurich, Switzerland. My business is half based in Zurich. I was in an Irish pub, kind of one of those famous bars where everybody knows your name. And a female bartender, probably in her mid-20s, said, "Are you Joe Tippens?" And it shocked me because I guess since there's video blogs like this we're doing right now, where it get posted and people actually then see my face, they recognize me. And I said, "Well, yes, I am. Why are you asking?" And she literally got up on this chair and she yelled for the whole bar to shut up. And the whole bar got quiet. And she goes, "This man saved my mother's life."
Oh,
And I'm like, okay, right.
wow.
Well, 30 minutes later, mom came into the bar with her cell phone for hugs and selfies and the
Oh
rest.
my gosh.
And the following week in London, the exact same thing happened in a very upscale hotel bar in London, an identical story. And so it happens to me literally once or twice a week now, even with
Oh,
just traveling world, what I do. Um, and I think the coolest thing is I wish I'd have had the time to build a very quality, well-structured database, because I've just been inundated with success stories coming in over the transom, both people reaching out to me directly or through the Facebook group or directly on the blog itself. And I know we're well over 1,000 success cases of all different kind of cancer subtypes all over the world. But it's the problem is I don't know. I happen to believe there's probably 10x that I don't know about, and I don't know the failures, so I don't know the denominator. And so there's no way to do a clinical trial type database because I don't know all the information. However, I pretty much can tell you that when people proactively report failures where this did not work for their loved one, 90% of those were so skeptical that they just waited until it was too late to start. When I was just over in Switzerland 3 weeks ago, and my partner asked me to sit down with a family in their village, and they had a 8-year-old boy who the doctors had said there's nothing else we can do. And he had really high pressure tumor in his brain there's nothing they could do with. And I said, well, look, it may be too late. He was literally on his deathbed, but why not try it? You know, I'm not a doctor, I'm not a scientist, I shouldn't be even telling a couple like you this, but what I can tell you is if it was my 8-year-old son, I would try it, right?
absolutely.
Well, they didn't even get started on it, and he passed away the next day.
Oh,
Yeah, so and I have a lot of stories like that where people, um, you can imagine why people are skeptical. You know, are you kidding me? It's a veterinary drug for dogs, and that's going to cure me. And if I didn't live the story, I probably wouldn't be a believer. You know, but
well, but so many things are the same across different species. And, we're not skeptical of some of these high powered radiation treatments, chemotherapy treatments,
yeah,
surgical interventions that leave people sicker. I mean, I think you
yeah,
said in the lecture I heard from you that the only time you were sick was when you were undergoing those treatments.
yeah,
Doesn't mean we don't do those treatments. To me, this is the epitome of integrative medical care, which is the best of all worlds. And Joe, there's no telling how many people you've saved from getting cancer. I mean, lots of people, as a fellow Oklahoman that I know, are using your protocol as a prevention. And of course, that can never be measured, but it's certainly real.
yeah. But I'm sure there are some,
Mhm.
but there's no way of knowing. You know, so what we in this 6-year journey, what I can honestly say to anybody is I now have hundreds of thousands of people have taken this. I mean, how many clinical trials involve hundreds of thousands of people? And we now know for sure that with a couple of minor exceptions, 98, and those are probably less than 2% of the population, the downside risk is virtually zero. Mm-hmm. And with thousands of success cases coming in over the transom, we also know that there is upside and there's benefit. So in any business in the world, if you have zero downside and you have knowledge of upside, then the only question you really should ask is why not?
Right. Well, as a venture capitalist, nobody knows that better than you when you think about risk versus return. It's kind of really.
Yeah, I don't ever get the chance to do anything without risk.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Never. So, yeah. So it's now the question is, where do we go from here, and what do I do from here? I'm really at a loss. I don't know. The blog continues to grow. The number of people becoming believers continues to grow. And more importantly, the success cases keep coming in weekly, and that keeps growing. So, I get a huge chills go all over my body when somebody calls me and tells me I saved their life.
Oh my goodness.
And that's crazy. How do you get that chance to do that in any life, right?
Oh, to the purpose you're living is so impressive. And it's your generosity. I mean, whenever I contacted you for this podcast, you didn't say, how many listeners, how many countries, how many downloads. You just said yes.
Yeah.
And I can't thank you enough. And then
a forum like this is way better for me than trying to field 1,000 phone calls. Right. And so it comes back to, I have to keep control of my time. I mean, I'm flunking retirement, and
you're living the life that's truly life, Joe. You are
extremely busy, and I love what I do, so it's really not like work. But there should be an efficient way of getting this out. In a perfect world, I could have a meeting with the head of Department of Health and Services in the United States government and give them the data of how much worse our Medicare is spending on cancer deaths, and Medicare hospice, and you total it all up, and we're spending billions and billions and billions and billions on cancer for the post-65 crowd. Yeah. And if anybody could benefit from a clinical trial to get this human approved, it would be them. And I'm trying to get that audience. I haven't been successful yet. I'm not sure they want to hear it.
Well, this grassroots work that you're doing is so important, and I really appreciate you spending time with us here on Vitality Made Simple. We have quite a community developing, and this will be on all podcast platforms as well as on YouTube. I just can't thank you enough, Joe. And thanks for giving me a second chance. We flubbed up so bad on technology, but Joe's patient. He was curious to see if we would figure it out. And I appreciate that curiosity again. So thank you so much. I'm so proud to be a fellow Oklahoman with you. And I just wish you the utmost blessings from what you're doing, and just keep doing it. And I listeners, thank you for joining us for episode 92 of Vitality Made Simple. It's because of you that this podcast is spreading. I am a social media introvert, and so please keep sharing, please keep subscribing, and please keep listening. Share this episode with Mr. Joe Tippens with anybody it can help. His mantra has been, if this helps one person, it's worth it. So thank you again for your time, Joe. It's just been a total pleasure to spend time with you.
You're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.